Hello and welcome. This is Koren, and you're listening to How She Really Does It, the place where inspiration and possibility meet. I'm so excited to have you here with me on YouTube. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and like this video. Make sure to also head down to the description box below and click the link to sign up for my newsletter to get podcast episodes and Sunday's letters filled with love delivered to your email inbox weekly. Now here's the show.
On a lake, she is dreaming, she is drifting, never been so wide awake. Captured in the moment by the beauty all around her, there's nowhere else that she would rather be.
Hello and welcome. This is Koren, and you're listening to How She Really Does It, the place where inspiration and possibility meet. I've been doing the show for almost 11 years. That is a lot of episodes. There's incredible evergreen content on my site or in iTunes. And I invite you to take a deep dive. Today, I'm bringing back the third of 3 interviews that I did with the fantastic Brené Brown. And we're talking about worthiness. And it's such an important conversation because first off, people struggle with worthiness in certain aspects of their life. And so look at that and know that you're not alone, and you can work on reminding yourself that you are worthy. And what does it really mean? And this is the work that I do with clients on a day in, day out basis about believing in themselves and being worthy, and that letting go of the prerequisites of worthiness. So I invite you to listen to this interview that I did with Brené. It's fantastic. And then take some nuggets from there and apply it in your life, because just knowing it isn't what's going to make a difference. You have to practice it. And as you practice it, you're going to fall down and you're going to get back up. And remember, you don't have to go it alone. Have a friend listen to this. Remind yourself. Hold each other accountable, but not in the, well, did you do this, and check in, but where you can talk about it, where you can own your story and love yourself, and realizing that you may understand this conversation intellectually, but you may not have it in your bones. And that's okay, because that's what happens when you practice. And that practice means you're going to fall down and you're going to do it incorrectly, and you circle back and you get back up. So I'm so excited for you to hear this interview that I did with Brené Brown on the topic of worthiness, and I will circle back with you afterwards. Brené, hello and welcome back.
Hi, I'm so glad to be with you.
It's great to have you back.
Thank you.
So this topic of worthiness, it seems to come up quite a bit in my life, whether it's with listeners or with the clients that I coach or with the swimming families that I'm around. So, why do we get so stuck in this feeling of not being worthy?
I think it comes up a lot for all of us, because in my work I have found it to be central. I think that this idea that we're enough, this idea that we're worthy of love and belonging, that we're worthy of joy, I think is central to our well-being, and I think probably underpins every single struggle that we have, from mental health issues, addiction, family issues, relationship, disconnection. I think often what's at the core of these is this issue of worthiness. Am I enough?
And why don't we feel enough?
Well, I think, it's interesting because having done this research for the last 11 years, one of the things I talk about often is that let me back up a little bit and say this. I think love and belonging, to love other people, to feel lovable, to have a sense of belonging, that we're a part of something bigger than ourselves, I think love and belonging are irreducible needs of men, women, and children. I think we are hardwired for connection and belonging. We are hardwired for love. And I think when those things are not present in our lives, there is suffering. And so if you kind of crudely took the people who I've interviewed over the last decade plus and you divided them into two groups, people who felt a strong sense of love and belonging and people who really struggled around those issues, there was only one variable that separated those two groups. And it's kind of as simple and complicated as this. Men and women who feel a strong sense of love and belonging simply believe they're worthy of love and belonging. They don't make more money. They're not more beautiful. They don't have more, they don't have fewer divorces or fewer struggles with addiction or fewer trauma histories. They have just cultivated this belief in themselves that they are worthy of love and belonging. Not, their vulnerabilities and imperfections don't stop them from being worthy. And so I think when we look at a topic as deep and broad as worthiness, what we have to understand about it is that worthiness does not have prerequisites. I think the way that most of us live, like when you're talking about your coaching clients or your swimming families, when I'm talking about, my own life, the lives of my friends, the people I've interviewed, what you hear a lot of, in sometimes subtle and not subtle ways is, well, I'm kind of worthy, but man, I'd be really worthy if I lost 20 pounds. Or, oh, I'd be really worthy if I made partner, or if my husband didn't leave, or if my son, stayed in rehab, or if we could keep our house, or if my daughter, made the 200 butterfly, we have this list of prerequisites for worthiness. And some of them were handed to us by our families of origin. Some of us, we put together on our own. But I think the first step in understanding what gets in the way is for us to get really honest about the list of prerequisites that we have in front of us.
And that's a great tool. And when you go through and figure out what are the list of prerequisites, is that when you try to see what's true and what's false? What happens after you've had that list?
Well, the list itself is really tough because, having studied shame, as one of my primary emotions that I study, when we're talking about the prerequisites for worthiness, what we're often talking about are our shame triggers, and people hate talking about shame. I mean, people have one of two reactions when I bring up shame. Number one is, I have no idea what you're talking about, but you're not talking about me. And number two is, I know exactly what you're talking about, but I don't want to talk about it. The things I can tell you very quickly, if you want to know what the opposite of worthiness is, the opposite of worthiness is shame.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can't really have a conversation about worthiness unless you're willing to talk about shame. And the thing I say about it, as my quick 1, 2, 3 that kind of opens people up to hearing is, number one, we all have it. Shame is the most universal human emotion that we experience. In fact, a lot of sociologists and psychologists call shame the master emotion. The only people who don't experience shame are actually people who have no capacity for connection or empathy. So the only people who don't experience shame are people who, really struggle with psychopathology, like sociopathology. So, we all have it. Number two, nobody wants to talk about it. And the important one is number three, the less we talk about it, the more we have it. So shame is that voice, I call them the gremlins, that drive this big message of never good enough. Never rich enough, thin enough, beautiful enough, popular enough, promoted enough, loved enough, appreciated enough, So I think when we talk about what is this prerequisite list, what is it that's getting in the way of our worthiness, what we're really talking about is what are the things in our lives that keep us feeling small? What are the things in our lives that make us feel unlovable? Is it something that we've done or failed to do? Is it something about our appearance? For women, universally, appearance is an issue.
Mm-hmm.
For men, social status, money, job, number one. And so what we have to think about is when we're talking about these prerequisites for worthiness, This is not just like a list that you jot down, like, milk, eggs, that kind of thing. It's a hefty reflection list. And then I think once we get that down, once we have that list, what we start thinking about is, how did these things get on there? Where did they come from?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like with the conditioning that we get, these lists that we have, could come from maybe the way we were parented.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you must do this to be a good girl. You must do this. Some of my clients will have these beliefs. Their prerequisite list is, I will be worthy as long as I do for other people.
Oh, God, yes. Are those women?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so some of it sounds like it's from there. And then the other place would also be just the conditioning we have, kind of watching how the world works. Because I know for me as a kid going, well, if my family doesn't have it together here, this must be how it works. And me putting it together. I will be worthy if I have this, this, and this. Maybe either it's from the media.
Oh, absolutely.
Now,
absolutely.
Are there other ways that you found in your research that people have come up with these prerequisite triggers?
I think, the strongest ones are, I think, normally prerequisites for worthiness. And we have to be really careful about that. I'll give you an example. I'm working on a book right now around parenting, and it's a really parenting and shame go hand in hand. In fact, the number one predictor of whether kids will struggle with shame and feelings of worthiness is parenting style.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a huge difference between, for example, shame and guilt. Shame is I am bad. Guilt is I did something bad. Shame is a focus on self. Guilt is a focus on behavior. We have some of the first longitudinal studies looking at whether kids who were raised who use more shame self-talk, like I'm stupid, I'm bad, versus guilt-prone kids, and the outcomes are really not good. Shame-prone adults and kids are, shame proneness is highly correlated with addiction, depression, eating disorders, suicide, bullying, aggression, violence. And so the outcomes are not good. Guilt proneness, where we're able to separate who we are from our behaviors, is negatively correlated with those outcomes, meaning the more we're willing to say, I'm a good person, but this was a really bad choice,
Mm-hmm.
The less likely it is that we will end up struggling with those outcomes. And so parenting is this really, really huge piece of worthiness. The messages that we heard, and I can tell you that I've never been a parent and not a shame researcher, because I have a 12-year-old and a 6-year-old, and so I've been a shame researcher ever since before I got pregnant, and with Ellen, my oldest. But I am still, I know, in many ways, passing down some prerequisites for worthiness that I do not want to pass down. I'll give you a perfect example. She is in her first year of middle school, and for us in Texas, it's elementary through 5th, and then 6th, 7th, 8th, and I'm constantly, just small things like, saying things like, "Come on, we can't be late." It's so inappropriate to be late, or I'll tell her not to care what her friends think, yet she'll see me totally going nuts. I'm like, I can't do this. What will people think if I show up like this? Or what will people think if the yard looks like this? So it's not as easy as tell your child, reaffirm their self-worth, separate their choices from their behaviors. It's also about how we behave and how they see us behaving.
Mm-hmm.
Girls who watch their mothers starving to death are girls who watch their mothers making fun of other people's weight,
Mm-hmm.
are going to grow up with a prerequisite of worthiness around thinness.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't not make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
I mean, we as the mothers are such huge teachers for our children.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole, and so I think those prerequisites for worthiness really, I think you nailed it, to be honest, Koren. I think it's family of origin, and I think it's media.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are the two biggest influences that I have seen.
Well, and I mean, so I had my tiger mom who had really good intentions, but I was told that, you have to do this, this, and this. And to be good, it was to be good enough, right?
Right.
And then I got there and I'm like, okay, but it never felt like I ever arrived. And then I think for me, the other side was just the media images, and also, thinking that I would finally measure up if I could measure up to this TV show, right?
Yeah.
Which wasn't real.
Right.
And as a parent, not feeling worthy because, I wasn't Carol Brady with this blended family that was so perfect.
Right.
And then finally realizing, oh my gosh, what am I thinking? Carol Brady, where are the children's, biological parents that aren't there? I think they're both dead. And she has Alice. Their house is always clean. Carol doesn't seem to, she doesn't have a job outside the home. And the husband seems to be not very stressed from his job. And the biggest issue is Marcia getting her nose hit with the football. And I'm comparing my life, right? Yeah. This is my worthiness of if I'm a good enough parent was from this TV show. And finally I had to let that go and go, okay, I have a blended family. How can I do the best that I can do instead of trying to measure up to a TV show that wasn't real?
No, I mean, it's absolutely. And we do that every day. I mean, and in ways that are just, I mean, I do that, Did we talk about Something's Gotta Give last time?
No.
I don't think we did. Okay, do you know the movie?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember the house in the movie, that Diane Keaton's Hampton's house or wherever it was? I'm talking about Diane Keaton, Jack Nicholson movie.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Do you know which one I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay, so everyone I know that saw that movie, which was a great movie, just coveted Diane Keaton's house in that movie, her character's house. It was like in the Hamptons or something, and it was just perfect. And I remember coming home after that movie thinking, and she's a playwright, and she writes in the Hamptons and goes into the city for her plays. And I remember coming home and thinking, look at this house. Just look at it. I mean, what is my life? What have I done? I mean, and then I read an article about that house in Architectural Digest.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even a house. It's like a movie set that they basically choreographed everything down to the color of linen pants that Jack Nicholson was wearing, to the wall colors and what books were being shown on the bookshelves. They flew the books in from a bookstore in New York. It cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, apparently, to fly all these books in, and then sorted them on the bookshelf based on the scene, so they would coordinate with the clothing and the lighting. It's like we compare ourselves to things that don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the thing is, when you talked about, never good enough, when you're comparing yourself to an ideal that really doesn't exist in real life, you never get there.
Mm-hmm. No, it's true. Have you seen the movie The Joneses? The Joneses?
No.
With Demi Moore?
No.
You got to watch that movie.
Is it good?
Oh, it's really good because it goes on this premise. And I don't want to tell you too much about it because then but it's the idea of this family and keeping up with the Joneses.
Oh,
right?
Got it.
And so watch it and then let me know what you think. But I just watched it the other night, and it's this feeling of, oh, well, they have this and they have this happy life. So then if I have this. And it was a very interesting way that the marketing went about within the movie. And so just watch it. I
can't wait. Yeah, I love stuff like that. I'll probably end up showing it in my classes.
So here's like, okay, so we understand. So once you get to, okay, I have this list to determine whether I'm good enough. And then you go through and where does it come from? okay, now you even understand, okay, this is what I was taught from my parents, right? To get love, I have to do this. I have to achieve. I have to take care of everybody else. I have to put everybody else first. And then what? Because you realize, well, nothing I do will ever get me that love that I'm so coveting from my parents, that I'm actually good enough.
Well, what's really powerful is how much healing comes in identifying just kind of what those prerequisites are. And then once we identify what the prerequisites are, it's time to do some work. It's time to say, to reality check those. I mean, to say, how real is this? I mean, for example, I'll be worthy. I'll feel like I'm enough when I have a house like Diane Keaton's in that movie. Mm-hmm. Or when I wake up every morning and my house is really clean and the kids are doing great. Well, that's just never going to happen. Wait, was yesterday Sunday?
Yes.
Yeah, walking to take communion at church, and a Lego fell out of my shirt. I'm not even kidding you. The top of a minifigure. That's just not ever going to happen. And so what we start to do is the first thing we do is, once we make this list, is we look at it and we think, okay, these are the prerequisites for worthiness. These are the shame triggers. This is the hard stuff. Number 2, let's reality check those. How realistic is it? Because one of the things that we feel like is it's just me. It's just me. I'm the only one who believes that, unless I have all these things going for me, I'm not enough. Mm-hmm. And then once we start to reality check it, we realize, oh my God, it's me and Koren. Oh, it's me, Koren, and every woman in the world, Mm-hmm. Then after we reality check it, and this is the really counterintuitive part, is we start to reach out and tell our story. Mm-hmm. We start to reach out. I mean, one of the things I say, and I think you've got the DVD, one of the things I talk about in the DVD is that our worthiness lives inside our story. Mm-hmm. And our choices are to own that story and say, this is who I am. I am late for church. My roots look really bad because I did cancel my appointment to get my hair highlighted. This is true, last week, because Charlie was hiding underneath the bar one morning before school. It was our first week of school last week, and I was squatting down talking to him about why he should come out, and I stood up and just cut the top of my head on the corner of the bar. So I had to cancel my appointment to get my hair highlighted because I knew it would burn like hell when they, started to cover my gray, which is real. I get to church, my hair looks like really funky, a Lego falls out of my shirt. These are my stories. And when we do one of two things. We own them and tell them and share them with people who've earned the right to hear them. Mm-hmm. Or we stand outside of our story, wishing that it wasn't our story, and hustling for our worthiness. Proving, perfecting, performing, pleasing. We stand outside of our story and, shuck and jive. Mm-hmm. And those are the two choices. So it's about, what are the triggers? How do I reality check them? Reach out and tell our story, and ask for what we need and talk about what we want.
And doesn't it take less energy just to own our story?
Oh, God, yeah.
Right. I mean,
and spend our life running away from it, for sure.
Worried about who saw the Lego fall out of your blouse versus telling everybody that's listening that you had a Lego fall out of your blouse.
Right. And it's not just that. It's their heart. That's a funny story, and people might be listening saying, well, I've got a really hard story about trauma, mm-hmm. or I've got a really difficult story about being a survivor of this, or I've got a really hard story that my husband's left me, for my son's basketball coach, and that's not a funny, my Lego fell out of my shirt at church story. Mm-hmm. Those are also stories that need to be told and need to be shared. And there's huge healing in sharing those stories. The deal with that is that we have to share them with people who've earned the right to hear them.
And that's so important, because it's not about just telling anybody.
No. It's not about just telling anyone. It's about, I have a lot of friends. I've been doing this work for a lot of time, but there are still only 2 or 3 people in my life who I would call and say I'm in deep shame about something, or, I'm in the, I'll call it the shame shit spiral. I'm mm-hmm. in it. I'm going down. I need to talk about what just happened. Mm-hmm. I tell a story in The Gifts of Imperfection. I tell a couple of stories about reaching out. One of the stories I tell in The Gifts of Imperfection is that when the Sex and the City movie first came out, the first day it opened, I went with my girlfriend Laura, and we got to the movie, and we were so excited, of course, surrounded by, a jillion other middle-aged women waiting for this movie to come out. And it was the first one, and it was very fun, and I think I had my iPhone with me or something, and I took a picture of it, and I put it up on my blog with a little thing that said, played hooky and went to go see the movie today, lots of fun. Well, a couple of months later, I get an email from a woman who said, hey, love your website, beautiful graphics, I'd love to know who does your work because I would like to contact the agency to do mine. I love everything on it, except, of course, that picture of you and your friend at the movies. I would never put such a poor quality photo on my blog, but then again, I'm a professional photographer. And so I read this email, and one of the things that happens that I've learned, one of the things that men and women who have high levels of shame resilience, who really do well with worthiness, one of the things that they have in common, and this is super interesting to me, is that they physically know what their symptoms are of shame. Meaning, when shame happens, when it kind of washes over us, it knocks us off our feet. We get hijacked by the limbic system. We get hijacked by the part of our brain that has no language, that can't, tell us what to do in a rational way. And so men and women who have a lot of shame resilience know physically what shame feels like for them. And so I know for me that when something shaming happens, my mouth gets dry, I lose track of it, time slows down, my armpits tingle, like I have this real physical thing. My face gets red, my heart beats fast. So I read this email and I just feel shame washing over me. But I know what's happening, and so I'm so mad. So I fire off this email that says, glad you like the site. Just checked out your work. If you don't want to put bad pictures on the internet, I would rethink posting yours. But I don't hit send. And I'm like, that's really crappy. So I just write another one. I'm like, okay, thanks for the email. If you're going to send a shitty email to someone, you should at least get your grammar right. There is contractual for, they are not possessive, THEIR there. I'm like, oh, equally as mean. So I'm like, I have this, my little saying. It's my worthiness shame saying, which is, when you're in shame, don't do anything, say anything, text anything, or email anything. Because we're in pain when that happens. So I go for a walk. I grab my tennis shoes. I put a baseball hat on. I'm like, I got to run. So I just go out the door, grab my phone. I'm running. I stop at the corner. I call my friend Laura, and I'm like, you're not even going to believe what someone just sent me this email. And I told her about the email. And we start talking about it, and I'm feeling better and better. And we had this long conversation. And she says, well, what do you think you should do? And what would be the brave thing to do? And I finally say, well, my best self would really probably delete it and just blow it off and never do anything. And she goes, oh my God, this is sharing your story. Like, this is shame resilience. Isn't this exactly what you say to do? Like, reach out to someone, tell your story. And it's such an example that here I am, the shame researcher. I've been doing the work at that point for 10 years. This happened 2 years ago. But we either own our story and share it with someone and say, my God, I just got this email and it really hurt my feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Or we do something that exacerbates our shame, which is totally, sending a mean email. And so I think we have to figure out who we can share our stories with.
And so what did you do? Did you ever email that woman back?
I talked to Laura about it. I kept walking for like 40 more minutes, and she stayed with me on the phone the whole time, which was awesome. And we talked about it, and we talked about how she would respond and how I responded, and what's brave for her is different than what's brave for me. And we talked about the whole thing. And by the time I got back, it was a great, like, here's a friend who loves me for my strengths and struggles.
Mm-hmm.
She knows all of me, and compared to someone who just doesn't know me at all and was just being critical. And, I just came home and deleted it and didn't think about it again until I told the story in the book.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the power of sharing our story. Because if we can share it with someone who deserves to, who's earned the right to hear it, and someone who believes in our worthiness, it's very powerful.
Because it helps you grow as a person.
Yeah, and it does something amazing for your friendships.
Mm-hmm.
My friend Laura that I'm talking about in the story, she and I really, we really, I think, share these stories with each other all the time. She'll text and be like, I'm in a terrible place.
Mm-hmm. And so how, now that you're becoming more and more public out there.
Oh, God, yeah.
Okay. And then you have a blog, and how do you put the lines? How do you put the boundaries?
That's a really hard question because I struggle with it every day. In fact, I just did a panel at Blog Her about this. It's always evolving. I'm always thinking about people. It's weird, Koren, because people always find this very surprising about me, but I'm a majorly private person, and I'm an introvert.
Mm-hmm.
And I can do, I talk in front of, 5,000 people. That doesn't bother me at all. But if you put me in a cocktail party with 50
mm-hmm.
people I didn't know,
mm-hmm.
I would want to die.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm also very private. I'm most comfortable at home with my friends and my kids and my husband. And so my rule, I think everyone has to have their own line and their own rule. And I think the advice that I give people is just be clear about what your line is and why it's your line. Like, for me, I'll share some things that are vulnerable in my life, but I don't share anything that's intimate in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to blog about a fight that I had with Steve.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to blog. I've got, my daughter's 12, so she'll read anything that I post about her, anything that I'm writing in the new book, because it's a parenting book. She'll vet anything about her that goes into the public.
Mm-hmm.
Because, those are her stories,
mm-hmm.
not mine, and so I'm just, and I think I just try to keep a balance of staying connected with the people who read my stuff and being honest about who I am and being transparent,
Mm-hmm.
but also the more intimate moments are for me,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really important. And plus, I think social media can be very dangerous in the sense that, if I'm having a picnic with my family, I don't want to get out my phone and look at my picnic with my family, because then I'm on my phone thinking about Twitter instead of being present with my kids and my husband.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I'll share things like that if it's funny or something's happening, but I try to really be mindful of it.
Mm-hmm.
What about you?
I think I constantly ask myself, what is it that I want to share? Again, with the same thing, my husband's very, very private. I'm an introvert, but I am an extrovert. I like to be around big groups of people, and I don't have a problem with being around 200 kids or, a bunch of swim families, and I can give talks. I can do all of that, but I don't like cocktail parties, and
Right.
my preference is I went out with a girlfriend on Saturday night or Friday night, and we talked for 6 hours. I love that.
Yeah, me too.
I love, love, love that. And she's one of my dearest, oldest friends. But to go and just do idle chit chat at a little party, no. Sometimes,
that's me.
So I get clear about why it is that I'm going, but because sometimes I have this image of, well, this is what you're supposed to do, right?
Right.
And I'm like, oh, but I hate that. So, and I don't blog too much. So, but I've, trying to figure out what I'm willing to put out there. Sometimes I make the mistake about not being with my family and throwing something up on Facebook, that we're doing. It was great. We just went to Montana for a couple of weeks. And the thing that was great about that is there wasn't great cell phone or internet service.
Yeah.
So it really forced me to be more connected with my family.
Amen.
So, I don't know. I don't have like a direct answer. I just, when I'm on the air, I tell stories that would be okay to tell. Nothing that would ever embarrass my children.
Right.
And I'm really conscientious of that because I tend to tell stories a lot, whether it's of my kids, other people that I've coached, especially swimmers. And so I'm constantly telling stories. And so confidentiality is something that's really important because I want people to feel safe.
Right.
So I think of it in that terms, but I don't have like strict guidelines, and I'm constantly trying to think about, how much, because in my town, I do live kind of a more public persona, and how much do I want people to know and how much not. But I still try. I mean, in the end, my goal is to be authentic. But I used to believe being authentic mean I had to tell everybody.
Right.
And I think from you and just from other stuff, I realized that it's about telling people that have earned the right to hear it. So
I think that's true. And I think that, in fact, one of the things that was interesting to me, I thought the same thing about authenticity for a long time until I started writing The Gifts of Imperfection and really had to drill down to what is authenticity, what's the definition. And, that's why I was really purposely put a lot of the definitions into The Gifts of Imperfection from the work, because we throw around words like authenticity and love and belonging, but they're not as helpful personally for me unless we have some kind of like working definition of them, because they're all kind of hallmarky words. But one of the things I found in my research is that a lot of people actually really protect themselves from authenticity by oversharing. Like, so you may not really know somebody because, that it's that person who tells you everything about everything, but it's almost as a way to protect themselves because they don't have to talk about how they feel about it. They're just constantly reporting.
Oh.
Yeah, and so I think that's why I don't have a hard and fast rule, because I think I'm always, I'm always trying to be mindful about where I am and am I doing things for the right reason.
Mm-hmm. And what's the intent?
What's the intent?
Yeah.
Total.
Well, it's interesting because growing up as a kid, I had so much shame because I grew up in an alcoholic home that was abusive and stuff. And I had this huge story. But so for me, I've had to go through my own transformation because I learned how to make it all look really good, right? Or at least that's what I thought. Who knows what I really made it look like. But so my role was to make it look better than it was. And I went through that for a long time, even through college. And coming into adulthood and going into my 30s, it was like, okay, well, I wasn't less worthy because I went through these experiences, and but it's interesting because still some of my core beliefs get stuck on that. And I'm like, oh, there's that core belief again. And I know where it came from. It came from the fact that I grew up, in my childhood. But realizing that a lot of people had, difficult families to live in and difficult households to live in. And so one of the things that I learned was that when I was willing to open that up, I actually got more connected with other people.
Yes.
And at the same time, I've kind of dropped my story of, oh, well, I'm an ACOA kid and there was a lot of abuse in the home, right? It was like, okay, well, this is part of my journey, but here's also how I was able to grow as a person. I wouldn't, want to go through it again.
Right.
But here are the things. And, and then I look at my children's lives and I'm like, oh my gosh, my daughter's biggest problem is yesterday I wouldn't let her watch TV after she came home from a camping trip. And I was considered a very mean mom.
Right.
But I'm like, okay, well, if that's what you want to believe, that's fine.
No, it's true though. And I think the story that you're telling about how you grew up is very similar to, it sounds like, how my mom grew up. And I don't when we talk about owning our stories and sharing them, so she was the head of everything, the head of the drill team, the head of the, every club, the smartest girl, and, and she dressed impeccably. And And basically that was, that was a real shield for her because she had an alcoholic mother, and it was, the 1950s, and it was Ozzie and Harriet and Leave It to Beaver, and everything was perfect, and her mom, my grandmother was divorced, and it was, and as it turns out, she wasn't even, people weren't even allowed to go to her house.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know that when my mom started to share that story with me when I was in my early 20s, it was so meaningful for me as she started to own her story. Pieces came together for me of my story, of how my parents put together a marriage and a family that was not going to be like, that was going to be different, and where a lot of the pressures came from. And, I think there's a quote in The Gifts of Imperfection that I think is so true, and I really try to live by it. And it's, owning our story and loving ourselves through that process is the bravest thing we'll ever do.
Mm-hmm.
There's no one out there, not a single person listening, that does not have a story that would break your heart. This is, life is wonderful. I love life. There's a lot of joy in my life, but nobody rides for free.
Mm-hmm.
We all we all have hard things that have happened, that will happen, that are happening. And the more willing we are to surround ourselves with people that can not only hold space, they can hold space for our story and can say, our fear of sharing our story is that we will be defined by that single story and crushed under the weight of it.
Mm-hmm.
That you will never be able to be anything more than that kid who was raised in that house.
Mm-hmm.
And then that will be used to explain everything that you do that someone doesn't like.
Mm-hmm.
Or that I'll never be more than someone who's really struggled with this, or Susan will never be more than, whatever happened to her. And John, well, his dad committed suicide, and that's his story. And, none of us are a single story.
Mm-hmm.
And that, and so the more we can own the story and say, yeah, that's a part of who I am. That's a part of my history. That's a part of my story. That's a part of who of what I am. But it's a really tiny part of a really complex story.
Mm-hmm. Well, and isn't it also when you can finally own that, then you're not spending all this energy trying to run away from it or to cover it up.
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
And then you use that as a way to blame everything else that happens in your life.
No question. No question.
And it's a process, and I like to use the word, it's a mesh. Everything's just meshed together.
I love that.
Because you can clean up certain parts, but everything all just spills over, right? I mean, we don't overeat because we don't know enough about food. We're overeating because of something we feel about ourselves. Maybe it's because we don't feel worthy. That tends to happen with my clients a lot. They don't feel worthy, or that there's not enough, and so it just all meshes over. It's not just, let's just clean up this food issue.
Right.
And, it's like when you clean up the food issue, you're actually cleaning up a lot about your life, your relationships with people, your relationships with self, maybe your money. I mean, just everything. It's not just one compact thing.
No, I agree 100%. And 100%.
So I have a question, because I used to have a huge struggle with this maybe about 10 years ago, and I don't know where it came from. Maybe it was Marianne Williamson, but I remember somebody had said, you are worthy just because you were born. And maybe it wasn't her. What are your thoughts about that?
Oh, I think worthiness is a birthright.
So just the fact that you are born, you are worthy.
Yeah.
You made it through the gene pool of being able to be alive.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all worthy of love and belonging.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we can make choices in our lives. When we make choices in our lives where we hurt other people and we're dangerous, or even emotionally dangerous, then I think we should be held accountable.
Mm-hmm.
But and I'm big on accountability. Like, I don't put up with a lot of BS about a lot of stuff at all. I mean, like, I think because of what I talk about, people assume I'm the trophy for everybody, 500 gold stars, let everybody off the hook person. Well, I'm against all those things, actually. And so I'm a pretty serious accountability person. When someone makes choices that take away the rights of other people to be safe and to experience joy and to know love and belonging, there needs to be accountability and boundaries, and that and that needs to happen. But it doesn't change the fact that that person is, worthy of love and belonging.
Mm-hmm.
If you went into a prison system, and we know this from shame work that's been done in the criminal justice system, if you go into a prison system of violent offenders, people who have raped and killed, and you think to yourself, none of these people are worthy of love or belonging, what you're missing is that the violence they perpetrated happened because they already believed that about themselves.
They already believed what about themselves?
That they weren't worthy of love or belonging.
Oh.
Shame, there's no higher correlation than there is between shame and violence.
Mm-hmm.
If we could shame people into making better choices, we wouldn't have the stuff we have right now. Shame is far more likely to produce destructive and violent behaviors than it is to cure them.
Mm-hmm.
You tell people they're worthless. You tell people they're nothing. You tell people they don't deserve anything good. They have nothing left to lose. And that's when people become very dangerous.
My mother is Korean, and she was the second born child. They have 5 children, and the first 4 were girls. And she was born during the 1940, so she went through the Korean War, and she was born to a relatively wealthy family. But her mother, and I didn't know this until 3 or 5 years ago, because I don't speak Korean, but her mother had told her that she was worthless and all the girls were worthless and all they were going to do was take from the family. And it's interesting because when she shared that story with me, it made me understand why there's so much self-righteousness to her. And it also, I understood just kind of the choices that she made and the marriage that she was involved with, right? Because when you have your mother telling you your whole life that you are worthless, and there's a part of you, I think there's a part of her that was the rebel that was like, well, screw you, let me show you, right?
Right.
And then there's a part of her that still believed that, and so she put herself in situations that replicated that situation. And it was just really, really powerful for me to go, oh my gosh. And like you with your mom, I was able to put stuff together and then understand even, because there was a lot of shaming in my childhood and why my mom did that, because she did what she knew.
Well, absolutely.
So, and it's interesting because I still have these core beliefs that circle around and around. And even though, but one of the things that I have, because here, I'll just say it. I have this because I've pretty much told everybody at this point. I've come to this realization, Brené, in the last couple of years that I have this core belief that I'm a loser, right? And it's so funny now because I really just own it. When I tell my friends, when I first told my friends this, they're like, what? How can you think you're a loser? And, look at what you've accomplished. Look at what you've done. Right. I'm like, oh, no, I have this belief. Look at your husband. No, I still have this belief. I'm a loser. And so when bad stuff happens, I'm like, oh, see, of course it happened. I'm a loser. And I'm working through it. And I feel fine to put it out there publicly as we're talking about this. But this summer, a girlfriend of mine who's also a coach came out to visit with me, and she started to mock me because I was like, I had this loser belief. I was really grieving it still. And I said something had happened, and she's like, oh, that happened because you're a loser, right? And we were just kind of laughing about it. But that laughter also helped kind of free it a little bit, loosen it up. I mean, it's still kind of there. And when things don't go right, I'm like, oh, it's because of this. And then I have to do the work on all of that stuff. But I realize I have so much evidence in my life that I'm not a loser. But, it was an easy explanation as a kid of how could I be born into this family? How could I have gone through this? How could I have gone through that? And then I realized that my core belief has also stopped me so many times of getting what it was that I want, because I made it so much more difficult for myself personally. And, it's interesting, but by identifying it, I feel, maybe I'm wrong, you can tell me if I'm wrong, that I've empowered myself more because I see it, and then I look at what is really true about that and what is not true.
No, I think it's super powerful, and I thought it was just me, which is the book basically about shame resilience and how we build that. I have a whole section on knowing laughter, about when we share something, when we share a narrative or a message like that with someone we really care about, and we reach out and we're like, oh my God, I've got this gremlin that just keeps saying, you're a loser, and we can laugh about it with each other. That kind of knowing laughter is a prerequisite for healing shame.
Mm-hmm.
And it's true. I mean, I think I've got a core message that constantly plagues me of I'm lazy. I'm not kidding. I mean, I know. I felt like laughing when you said that you're a loser. Like I do. I had this like, yeah. I mean, like I know. It's like it's like I'm a lot of things. That's not one of them.
Yeah, we're all trying to figure out how you really do it.
Well, but I'm telling you, I have this core message, and like I'll be really exhausted, and I won't take a nap because it'll get right into that gremlin of you're lazy.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, and so, and sometimes I'll tell Steve, I'm like, oh, I didn't get very much done today, and I watched like 2 episodes of Law and Order, and he's like, let me guess, you're super lazy. He's like, watching you makes me tired. and we do, we kind of laugh about it and stuff, but the thing is, and I know we're wrapping up, and this is probably a great place to wrap up, but shame, like love and belonging and trust, happens in the part of the brain that has no control over language. And so shame thrives. Oh, it loves it because if we don't speak it, it stays, and it just grows exponentially. It like burrows in and metastasizes. So shame hates having words wrapped around it. It hates you laughing about this with your friend. It hates me telling you and all your listeners that I have this gremlin about being lazy. I mean, it just, and where did that come from? That came from having a German-American family where you don't get sick, you don't miss work, you don't take naps, you don't say no. You do it. You do it perfectly, and you do it on time, and you don't ever stop until you drop. And then when you drop, you're being lazy. Give yourself CPR and get back up and go. Don't inconvenience someone else about CPR. Give it to yourself. But when we tell these stories and we put words around it and we share it, shame can't hold on. And so 80% of shame resilience work is recognizing what is the prerequisite, what is that gremlin, and and speaking it. Who can I tell? Who can I talk to this about? And so when you're talking about putting together that list, if you looked on your prerequisite for worthiness list, there would probably be a lot of things related to that gremlin. It wouldn't be as easy as be a winner, but it could be excel at everything, be liked, take care of other people. That's how that would, for me, the lazy thing shows up on my list is, don't ever stop. And so it just doesn't work.
And so when you take a look at this and you have somebody to tell, is that when the shift of worthiness happens?
Absolutely. That's why it's really important. In fact, I have this whole 2 pages, like a whole layout dedicated to who you want to share this stuff with and who you don't want to share this stuff with in the gifts of imperfection, because you want someone, I always say you want the stretch mark friend. You want the friend that you sat down and shared this with and y'all were laughing about. You want the person who utterly believes in your worthiness. Because what you don't need reflected back when you share something hard from someone is, wow, you should worry about that. That is kind of a worthiness block for me with you. That you don't want. But I will tell you that I would seriously doubt that your gremlin of loser and my gremlin of lazy have a huge hold on us anymore, because by definition, our willingness to talk about it with the umpteen bajillion people will listen to this as a download, by definition says that we are well on our way. Like when I share shame stories with audiences, when I do lectures or talks, even when I talk about like the TED Talk, I'm not going to share something with it so fresh and hard. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just not going to do that.
Well, that makes sense. Well, Brené, I want to thank you so much for coming back on the show. It's been great talking with you again.
Well, I've had so much fun, and anytime I love it so much, and you're a great host and a great interviewer, so whenever you want to talk worthiness, shame, authenticity, courage, I'm here.
I love to talk about this. This is one of my favorite things.
Everybody's going probably like, oh, my God. They're thinking, y'all need to add weird to your list. But, already on there. Check. Done.
Oh, one more thing, but I don't want to run out of time, is the King's Speech. Have you seen that?
No, but we just got it to watch with my daughter.
Okay. And we watched it with both of our kids, and one of my daughters has a speech impediment. So we kind of broke the PG-13 rule, but it was okay. But my husband, because, I've been talking about shame a lot. And so he's like, well, this is like kind of the epitome of shame. So watch that and then let me know what you think. But yes. So thank you so much. Good luck with your book. And
thank you.
I'll have you back soon.
I'd love it.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
I just love that conversation. I learn so much every time I listen to it. And I want you to remember, worthiness is a birthright. I love that, what Brené said about that. Let's just stop arguing about our worthiness in our heads. That takes a lot of energy and creates a lot of drama in our lives. You are worthy because you were born, period. And remember, we all have shame triggers. It is important to know what they are and who are the people who've earned the right to hear a story. Because when we can share with the right people, we can move out of shame to worthiness. And remember that worthiness prerequisites you have and you think is actually helping you become successful, ditch them because they're actually your shame triggers. As Brené says, as unique as we all are, an awful lot of us want the same things. We want to shake up our current, less than fulfilling lives. We want to be happier, more loving, forgiving, and connected with the people around us. If this is what you want, then I invite you to go to my website or the link in the show notes and sign up for my upcoming group coaching program called Enough. I'm a master certified life coach and a trained daring way facilitator in Brené Brown's work. And for the past few years, I've worked one-on-one with clients as they dug into their own prerequisites of worthiness and cultivating their own worthiness and love and belonging. And this is an opportunity for you to do it in a group coaching program. So I invite you, go sign up for the first to know list on Enough, and I'll be letting you know what's coming out. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm smiling big for you.
On a lake, she is dreaming, she is drifting, never been so wide awake.